Today we're going to talk about periodicals, or magazines as most people know them. Periodicals offer so much exciting magic that's totally different from most other books, or at least can be. So let's dive into how they differ from a traditional magic book. This is a continuation of the 5-Foot Shelf of Magic series that I started a long time ago. The bottom line is, once I got past the initial 5 feet of magic, now I'm going beyond the 5th foot to explain to you other books that you can fill out your library. It may or may not be obvious, but I won't be able to cover every magazine that's ever been published. I'm really only sharing some of the ones that I have and that I can speak to because I enjoy flipping through them from time to time. If you have favorites that aren't mentioned, or maybe I mention your favorite, drop a comment down below with why you think yours should be included, or if I did include yours, why you think that's a great choice. I'm going to progress somewhat haphazardly, so I'll drop some links down in the description below so that you can jump around to the periodicals that are interesting to you. I think it's only appropriate that I start off at one of the beginning magic magazines, and that's Hugard's Magic Monthly. It probably goes without saying that this classic was published by the late Jean Hugard and ran from 1943 all the way to 1964. So it had a very nice long run, and it covered tons and tons and tons of miracles. If you don't already know, the entire set of Martin Gardner's impromptu magic was actually first published as a column here in Hugard's Magic Monthly. And that's one of the first points that I think is so interesting about the world of magic periodicals. This is the place where a lot of people get published first. And a lot of people who were aspiring writers were able to submit some of their first tricks, including Harry Lorraine, to this classic magic periodical. There was also an eclectic variety of other things that people submitted. It wasn't really devoted to any one kind of magic. You'd find things about mentalism and cards, ropes, dinnerware, silks. It ran the whole gamut. I don't think I can tell you everything you need to know about Hugard's Magic Monthly, except that it is a very invaluable resource. These printed volumes are long out of print, but if you want to get this entire set in a far more compact and accessible format, you can always purchase them digitally from a reputable magic dealer. If you get these in a PDF, you'll be able to search through them and find tricks far more quickly than you can with the physical volumes. Stanyon's Magic by Professor Ellis Stanyon ran from 1900 to 1920, so as you can tell, there is quite a bit of material in these pages, and as you might expect coming from 1900 to 1920, it is in a very old school and charming style. Candidly, I haven't spent a lot of time in this volume because it's just so old and so big. In fact, this is somewhat awkward to have except on a table because it's just so heavy. I know I make it look lightweight with the strength of my muscles, but it's a pretty heavy book. Part of the fun in looking through these older magic magazines are, one, the advertisements, because even though they teach some tricks within the pages, there are also advertisements for the type of magic that was going around. And that's where you get some of the value, is that these magazines are a snapshot in time. It's like a time capsule that now is bound into a collected book. You can see all the gossip about who was talking about who liked who was not happy with other magicians. You'll see photographs of the way people dressed, or at least the way they dressed for pictures that would go in a magazine. And you'll see business cards and other advertisements. It's just really cool to see how far magic has come, and who knows, you may even find some useful ideas that no one's touched for a long time. I've already done an entire review, and indeed, my 5-Foot Shelf of Magic included this series originally, but what discussion of periodicals would be complete without discussing the Jinx by Ted Hanneman. This is another periodical that is available digitally. You can get a PDF that's searchable if you're willing to do it in that digital format. This set brought us all kinds of classic tricks. While we already knew about the center tear in other sources, this popularized it and taught a great version. Pseudo-psychometry, Di Vernon's brainwave deck, Stuart James published a bunch of tricks in here. Anyway, it's just a great set of magic and mentalism. It's hard not to make a spot for it in your collection. And if you can get a copy of either the softbound or hardbound volumes, it's just, again, really fun to flip through, look at some of the old tricks that you will be able to breathe new life into. Which brings me to yet another point. Because these are magazines and they're fleeting in a way, you get the magazine, you read through it, and you move on. And when you go back and you look at magazines that are this old, like the Jinx, you're for sure going to find tricks that no one has even thought about in decades. Which means you can work it out and make it completely yours. And you'll have something that someone a long time ago figured out was worth presenting to an audience, but may not have been seen by an audience for a very long time. And that's another reason that magazines offer such tremendous value to magicians. Unlike a book where it's one person and you're focused on their magic exclusively, a magazine is a great way to experience a lot of different people and get a flavor for the type of magic they create to see if it jives with your own personal style. Then if it does, you now have an informed way to make your next book purchase because maybe you read a trick by J.K. Hartman and you think that's great. Now you can go out and look for a J.K. Hartman book. One of my favorite magic magazines to flip through, and probably because it was one of my first, is Harry Lorraine's Apocalypse. This ran from the late 70s all the way to the late 90s, which for me made it a very interesting time period to explore magic. And there are a lot of tricks that I still do from the pages of these books. Earlier in the episode, I mentioned new authors getting their start in magic magazines. When you look at Apocalypse, you've got names like David Regal, who published some of his first material here in these pages and later adapted it or modified it, made it better until it was able to be published in a book of his own tricks. It's tempting to think that all of this is card material, and of course, like most magic magazines, it is probably a little heavier towards the cards than anything else, but there are also items with coins and ropes and silks and rubber bands, and possibly any prop you could think of. Plus, there are improvements to the tricks that came before it, which is another great thing about periodicals. Someone puts an idea out there, might be the first time that magic as a community has considered this, and now you have everyone thinking about this trick and saying, wait a minute, I have an idea. What if we took this one step further? So someone else will submit one of the possible variants and it may see publication at a later date. So not only do you get the original idea, many times you get a subsequent or better idea that came from someone else's head. Sort of related to the Apocalypse series is Richard's Almanac, which was subsequently put into the Collected Almanac by Richard Kaufman. This really is a pretty good treasure trove of especially close-up magic beginning in the 80s. You have tricks in here from Eugene Berger, Michael Skinner, Michael Gallo for coin stuff, David Roth put some of his original coin magic in here, Jeffrey Latta, Jay Sankey, and in fact, a lot of the Kaufman books that we later came to know and love had their genesis right here in Richard's Almanac. So it's very possible to say that without magic periodicals, we wouldn't have a lot of the magic tricks that we have. They're an integral part of the magic development and creation process. A slightly underrated and a little bit underground magazine that came to my attention a few years ago was Steve Beam's The Trapdoor. If you're familiar with Steve Beam's writing style at all, when you find out that he published this with some of his buddies, it just makes so much sense that you're going to be laughing out loud as you read through the pages of this book. That's not to say that the methods don't work or that they're just jokes. On the contrary, there's some really seriously good magic within these pages. There are a ton of sleights and tricks. It's not all cards, but it certainly skews heavily that way. This ran from the mid-80s all the way into the 90s, and as far as I know, the only place to get this is actually from Steve. But if you're looking for stuff that definitely flies below the radar that everyone's not talking about and not everyone will know, basically when you're at the next club meeting, you can say, oh yeah, I learned that from the Trapdoor, and you'll instantly impress your friends. If you're into walk around or strolling type of magic, then you probably want to check out The Magic Menu by Jim Syzygy. A veritable who's who of magicians from the 90s through the early 2000s contributed to this magazine with some of their best items that you could perform at a restaurant, bar, or walk around gig. I'm talking about names like Michael Amar, Doc Eason, Simon Lovell, of course Jim Syzygy himself, David Acer, Eric DeCamps. There are a lot of names. Obviously with all of these periodicals, there are just so many magicians who contributed some great magic that you can find in these pages. It's also kind of fun to read through some of the old reviews like there are in here when books like Di Vernon's Ultimate Secrets of Card Magic came out. What did everybody think about this? Or the VHS tapes that were being released at the time. But if you're like me, you want the tricks, and it can pay sometimes to do a little research and find those magazines that catered to your interests. I find that walk around and quick reset style of magic is sometimes a little hard to find, but not if you have a magazine like The Magic Menu. Because I'm a mentalist, one of my favorites that gave me a lot of material, or at least food for thought, was Syzygy by Lee Earl and Friends. This is the Journal of Contemporary Mentalism, and it shows. Before he was publishing the Psychological Subtleties, Banachek was contributing tricks to these pages, as well as Larry Becker, Danny Archer, Ross Johnson, and many other well-known mentalists. Like any magic, some of the presentations get a little dated, especially if they're in a magazine, because they were a snapshot in time, as we've already discussed, but with just a little bit of dusting off, you can dress them up to present very well to modern audiences. Of course, I'd be totally remiss if I didn't mention some of the current periodicals that are being put out, like the MUM or the Linking Ring, which are part of your membership for IBM or SAM. And of course, Genie magazine, which has been running probably longer than almost any currently published magic magazine. At this point, Genie has an online subscription which gives you access to everything in the back catalog, and there's a lot of magic that has seen print in those pages and maybe even is published in a book or a video at this point. As I've mentioned before, I still do tricks that I learned from Genie magazine. So certainly don't discount the fact that just because it was a magazine, just because it was a snapshot in time, that doesn't mean you can't find great magic that will appeal to you and your audiences. If you're looking for some more modern variations to check out, I'd try something like the Hermit magazine. I just want to give you options because I think that you can go back and you can buy old magazines, but you can also be part of a current magazine and maybe even submit your own tricks or variations and make the magic world a little better. I hope you enjoyed this look through magic magazines, and if you want to revisit the books that I recommend for the 5-foot shelf of magic, be sure to check out this playlist. As always, my friends, I appreciate you watching, and until next time, keep reading.